All right, let's talk about the multi-member IRA LLC. Now, this is an IRA LLC you're going to use when you want to partner multiple accounts into one LLC to buy a particular asset or set of assets. There's a lot of benefits to this, obviously, partnering multiple accounts and different sources of funds, but there's some downsides to it too. So I want to break down how this operates, how you set it up, and the pros and cons of using a multi-member IRA LLC. Let's walk through an easy example here. Let's say this is you and your spouse, and you want to partner your funds into the same LLC. Now let's say your spouse's IRA has $60,000 in it, your IRA has $40,000 in it, all right? Well, if you want to invest those accounts into this LLC at the same time, which is required, I'm going to come back to that, we're going to break up the ownership of the LLC, 60% to your spouse's IRA, 40% to your IRA. We're always going to set the LLC ownership based on the dollars invested between the accounts. Now that LLC is going to receive the cash, it's going to have an LLC business checking account, you can be manager of this IRA LLC, you can't pay yourself a salary or any compensation, but you can be manager of it. The LLC in turn goes out and buys the asset. So let's say this is a property that was, let's say it was $300,000. And between your own account, your own IRA, you didn't have enough to buy the property outright. But if you partnered in your spouse's account into the LLC, or this could be your friend or mom or uncle or whoever, another investor that you want to partner in, you can break up the ownership of the LLC based on the dollars invested between the respective IRAs to go out and buy this specific property. So we're combining multiple sources of cash into one LLC to buy a particular asset. Now that's the benefit, of course, and you could have 5 IRAs here, you could have multiple IRAs, all investing into the LLC at the same time to then go buy the property. Now you notice I'm always saying you're investing at the same time. And some of you might be thinking, hey Matt, I thought my IRA is prohibited to my spouse's IRA. And that's true. I don't want your IRA transacting between you and your IRA and your spouse's IRA. That would cause a prohibited transaction under the rules. However, the IRAs can co-invest into an asset at the same time. If this is a newly set up LLC and your IRA invests, your spouse's IRA invests, they're not transacting between each other under the rules. They're not buying or selling between each other. They're co-investing into an asset at the same time. Now, if you're like, all right, I'll have my IRA own the LLC 100% at first, and then I'll bring my spouse's in 6 months later. Well, that doesn't work either, because if your IRA owns the LLC 100% from the beginning, spouse comes along 6 months later to throw in some cash, well, you've now got to transfer LLC ownership from your IRA to your spouse's IRA. That's going to cause a prohibited transaction. So we want the IRAs to come in at formation, okay? So they're going to come in at formation. We're going to set up the LLC ownership based on dollars invested. Now, another important item you need to know, and this can be a drawback to the multi-member IRA LLC. If you want to get more money in the LLC later, or when money's coming out of the LLC, it's always going to come in and out based on the initial ownership you set. So if we set up the LLC ownership as 60% your spouse's IRA, 40% your IRA from the beginning, and you need $10,000 more in here, well, $6,000 is going to come from your spouse's account, $4,000 is going to come from your account, okay? The only way more money comes in here is based on dollars invested, based on the ownership percentages from the very beginning, all right? Now let's say there's $10,000 of cash here and you want to start taking it out. You started getting some cash flow accumulating. You're like, all right, we want to start, maybe you're in retirement now. You want to start taking distributions, or you want to send money back to buy stock or mutual funds or do other things. You can send the money from the LLC back to the IRAs, but it's got to go based on dollars invested and the initial ownership percentages. So if it was 60-40, there's 10 grand here you want to send back. 6 has to go to one IRA, 4 is going, of course, to the other. Now you can let cash flow accumulate in the LLC, and that's fine. You can go get a money market account or something like that to at least get some interest on it. But this is the multi-member IRA LLC, setting up ownership and allocating it based on the dollars invested from the beginning. If there's disqualified people like your account and your spouse's account, or like you and your kids or parents, we've got to have everyone come in at the same time. Now the last thing to know on this is, unlike an IRA, with your IRA owns an LLC 100% that goes out and does a property, and it's just your IRA 100%. It's pretty straightforward and easy. It's a single member LLC for tax purposes. There's no tax return required. If you have more than one IRA owning the LLC, though, it's considered a multi-member IRA LLC. And a multi-member IRA LLC is going to cause the filing of a partnership tax return. So now the LLC's got to file a 1065 partnership tax return. And that's going to go to the IRS every year. There's no tax due on a partnership tax return, but you do have to file something every year to say, here's the income we received, here's the expenses, here's the K1 or the amount of profit or loss going to each of the IRA members, which the IRAs don't do anything with it. They get the K1 and they don't file a tax return. But in this instance here, it is something that needs to be filed every year. So it's something you should know, or your accountant should know, obviously, when you're doing a multi-member IRA LLC structure. Now the last thing, I promise the last thing on it, is it's more expensive, okay? Now we set up these IRAs, of course, at Directed IRA, and this could be your account you roll over from Fidelity or your other brokerage account. Now you want to self-direct and go into an LLC. So you move your account over to Directed IRA, then you want to invest into the LLC. We set up the LLCs at KKOS Lawyers, and you can have another lawyer do it. But a multi-member IRA LLC is $1,500 plus the state filing fees. And if it's a single member LLC where your IRA just owns an LLC 100%, it's only $800. So when you add more IRAs in, the documents and process gets a little more complicated, so the law firm's fees increase. And again, this could be 3 or 4 IRAs here. I'm just showing 2 here to keep it simple here in the multi-member IRA LLC structure. And of course, that LLC needs to be kept active with the state wherever you set it up. So you might have an annual fee with the state where you set up the LLC. But this is the multi-member IRA LLC here. You can have IRAs. By the way, too, you can have an IRA and also an individual here, or a couple IRAs in your personal cash. Again, we're breaking up the ownership of the LLC based on dollars invested. Thanks for being here.